This conference will now be recorded.
Then you'll have some projections for the revenue streams and expenditures for the balance of 2020. I'm just checking. Tom, are you on?
I am.
Good. Okay. So then all the council is on. Paul is here. Steve Bronson is here, and Janice Corbin and Jeff Swanson. So this is great. Very good. Well, with that, then, Paul, if you could please start.
Well, thank you, Mayor. What we have for you for tonight's workshop is an extended update on the first quarter 2020 financial performance. I know Dustin provided a brief update in his finance staff report, I think at the end of April. This goes a little bit deeper, and as the mayor mentioned, also provides an update. I'm going to see if I can't, I haven't tried the page on this, so let me see. There we go. Provides a little bit more detail on the first quarter results, and then also does provide some high-level preliminary, I could add a few more maybe qualifiers to that, 2020 forecast. So we'll take a real initial look at what we think both the revenues and expenses will be for year end. And then just close with a slide on the 2021 budget process. This is the same content in general that we went over with the Budget Advisory Committee last week. So this will be much of a repeat for a couple of the council members. And I've got 16 slides, so shouldn't take the full allotted time. If you have questions as we go along, please ask them and we can explain more of the information, or I can try and respond or make a note to follow up later. So just wanted to start with a quick refresher on the card room gambling tax deferral. This is something you approved at your meeting last month. As you recall, the card rooms requested a tax deferral similar to deferrals that were being offered to businesses, but both the state and local level. The agreement that we entered into deferred their taxes for February that were due the end of March, and their taxes for the portion of March that they were open. They closed on the 16th and 17th of March. Those would have been due at the end of April. So those gambling taxes were deferred. The agreement allows for them to begin making those payments after the governor allows their businesses to reopen. And those payments would be due over spread over 3 months, but fully payable no later than the end of the year. And just to frame that deferral, the deferred taxes for the first quarter, so the February portion of that, was $78,000. If you look at the February and March total, it was $114,000 on the deferral. So before I move on, any follow-up questions on the tax deferral for the card rooms? Hearing none, I will move on into the more detailed first quarter financial update. Let me just orient you to this table. If you recall from prior years, this is the kind of presentation that I like to use when I provide quarterly updates. This is for the revenues. The major revenue sources are down the left-hand side. The information across the top allows you to compare current revenues to the budget and also current revenues to last year's budget. So just taking this from the top, just to hit a couple of the highlights, property taxes typically are due in April, so they'll come in the second quarter and then in November. So the second and fourth quarter. Year to date, we've received $56,985 on a budget of just over $506,000, so 11%. Last year, just under $45,000 on a full year total of $466,000, so 9.6% through the first quarter. A little bit more received than you might expect over the first quarter this year. roughly 12,000 more than last year, up 27%. This is pretty much a fixed revenue source. I'll have some comments in a minute on what we think the end of the year will be. But for the most part, the budget is a fairly sound number on this. Utility excise taxes coming in almost exactly as they did last year. 20.1% of the budget last year. Total was 270,000. Last year, the first quarter represented 25%. And what you're looking for on the revenue side, so that third column, percent of budget, you're looking for numbers that are in the 25% range in keeping with the calendar year totals. Some of these revenue sources are more seasonal, as we talked about, like the property taxes, but 25% would be a good number for routine revenues that come in pretty much proportionately throughout the year. On the sales tax, really a positive story. I'll have a little bit more information on this in a minute. $113,000 in the first quarter on a budget of $475,000. That budget does include some additional revenues expected later in the year related to the construction of the middle school. So the 23.8% is actually a pretty good performance in the first quarter, considering the budget. It really was loaded a little bit later in the year for that additional sales tax. And you can see the positive nature of this compared to the first quarter last year, just under 80,000 last year. So a full $33,000 ahead of last year, running roughly 41% higher. And that's primarily a function of the construction activity taking place the first part of this year. Local criminal justice tax, this is a countywide tax base coming in also stronger than last year, better than 25% of the budget. And then skipping down to the card rooms, you'll see $204,783. That excludes the $78,000 of deferral, 16% of the full year budget at $1.3 million. And you can see roughly $80,000 less than last year. So if you added back the $78,000 that is deferred, we're running just about the same as last year on the gambling tax from the card rooms. But not including it, rolling it up with the total taxes, you're at 17% of your budgeted amount, $458,000 compared to $494,000 last year, or $35,000 less, running about 7% less. But again, if you add that $78,000, that upside on the sales tax falls to the bottom line, and you'd be at roughly $33,000 to the good compared to last year. Moving down to the other major revenue sources, more positive news in the licenses and permits, the charges for goods and services, and intergovernmental, all three running at better than 25% of the annual budget through the first quarter, and all three coming in ahead of last year. The licenses and permits significantly higher. This is primarily a function of $76,000 in building permit fees paid by the middle school on the last day of the quarter, March 31st. So that's really driving the licenses and permits. But even without that, it would be almost double what it was last year. So again, strong single family permit activity in the first quarter of the year. Intergovernmental is up primarily because of the city assistance that you're now eligible for, again, with the lower sales tax revenue from last year. That was a major revenue source coming in about $20,000 a quarter. So that's reflective of the first quarter of 2020, but not included in the first quarter of 2019. Fines and forfeitures, this is one that you don't necessarily want to have be higher, but it is higher than last year. This is a result of primarily the traffic fines and court fee. So all told, general fund revenue at $751,000, 20% of the budget compared to $648,000 last year, up $102,000 or roughly 16%. So, but for the COVID-19 issue, your first quarter actually had very good performance in terms of the revenues. Any questions before I move on off of this chart.
Hey,
Got a
Paul, you
couple
did say
more.
this is first quarter, right? This is
Yes,
first quarter, so
first
this is the
quarter.
end of March.
Yep, through the end of March.
Perfect, thank you.
Paul, Doug here. Any reason why the utility excise taxes would be below 25%? Shouldn't those be fairly consistent, plus allowing for growth of new homes?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at last year, pretty significant increase. Last year was 270,000. This year, 338,000. I think that's primarily a function of the new activity related to the new homes. But this may also include some revenue associated with other commercial development that isn't online yet. I guess you'll see in my forecast, I'm backing off of the $338,000 budget when we get there, primarily because of the first quarter performance and the uncertainty regarding the development that'll come online the rest of the year. But typically this is a fairly reliable, regular revenue source. Again, sometimes the water usage and the gas tax will fluctuate depending on the seasonality, if it's a hard winter or if it's a dry summer. So I think, again, still have to wait to see how the whole year pans out.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Hey, Paul, this is John. Is there any indication that the card rooms might struggle to pay that $78,000? Have we talked with them or heard anything?
Nothing that we're aware of, no.
Okay.
And based on the notices that they've provided, they fully expect to reopen. I think both of them indicated within a week or two of the governor providing them the opportunity to do so. Okay, so a couple more slides, more looking at economic activity as well as the sales tax. We actually have April information on the sales tax, so I've added it to this slide. This is a tracking of the sales tax revenue by month, and it's cumulative. I should have put that on the label for the slide, and this goes back, looks at 2017, 18, and 19. Those are the different colored lines, and then the blue bars are 2020. So you can see through April, we've received $145,140 in sales tax, running well ahead of 18 and 19, running sort of halfway between 18 and 17. 17 was when we had the sewer line construction up to the junction. So there's a significant sales tax that came from that capital project. Another note on the sales tax is that this revenue is actually 2 months behind the activity. So while May may still come in fairly well, we should expect to see a decline beginning in June from the closure of the businesses and the stoppage of the construction activity. In addition, the state has offered a deferral for businesses in the sales tax. So we may see some additional impacts from that deferral over the June, July, and potentially August time period. But you can see again the fairly positive performance of the sales tax through the first 4 months of the year. And then residential building permit, another major indicator here. I show you the approved permits through March. And again, the same kind of presentation. This is cumulative and compares to 17, 18, and 19. You can see we're beating 19 by a couple of permits through March. In the little box here, I've got a little bit additional information about the activity through May. And this was through May 5th. Single family permit applications under review or issued 51, so well in advance of the 20. In addition, there's an apartment complex, 144 unit apartment complex that's currently in plan review. So it's not at the building permit stage, it's under review. I think it's got a couple of reviews completed So they're going through the exchange of information process on the building permit. My understanding is that's proposed to move forward with construction, a couple of different phases, maybe 2 or 3 phases this year. And you can see the total of those at 195 would be better than the budget of 180 in terms of the total units. Single family at 51 through May. And I did check in with community development, and 14 permits in May since they reopened. So not necessarily gangbusters, but not a stoppage of activity either. So 14 additional permits in the door in May under review. So just to give you a quick update on that. So by all accounts, construction activity seems to be continuing. It'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. So moving on to the expense side, this table is similar to what we had on the revenue side, same kind of presentation. Each of the major general fund departments down the left-hand axis, comparison to both 2020 budget and 2019 in this chart. And again, the whole 25% target for the first quarter, although you'll see the note down at the bottom, in the first quarter, the city pays its Association of Washington Cities insurance, liability insurance, at $149,000, and it also pays its annual CRESA fees, Clark Regional Emergency Services 911 fees. Those two combined are more than 5% of your total budget, and those are all paid in the first quarter. So it typically tips the first quarter past that 25% threshold, and you can see that's true for this year as well. Don't want to make too much of where we are here other than to potentially highlight planning. I know you had some discussions on this at your April meeting. Some of the activity related to both the Planning Commission, long-range planning reviews, as well as development permit reviews, causing those expenses to be high. If you go back again to the revenue side, the revenues are up significantly over last year as well. So to some extent, those are offsetting indicators. In Public Works, typically, the first quarter isn't as high in terms of the expenses that you have in the summer months when more of the projects are undertaken, and seasonal labor is added in those months as well. But bottom line, total expenses at just over 1.1 million on a budget of just under 4, 28% expended, compares to $1,075,000 last year. So up 61,000 from last year. But again, it's in the first quarter of the year. A quick summary at the bottom. First quarter general fund revenue at 751, the expenses, as we said, at $1,136,000, a deficit of 385,000, compares to a budgeted deficit for the surplus for the full year of just under 30. And you can see even last year, the budget was, the first quarter had a higher deficit at 426,500 compared to a full year deficit of 511,000. So. Any questions before I move on? Next slide goes into the sewer operating fund and the stormwater operating fund. I didn't provide any information on the non-operating funds, so your capital funds or your restricted funds, debt service funds. That information is available if you're interested, but it's not being provided tonight. The sewer revenue charges for service at 289,000 last year compared to 302,000. I think same question that Councilmember Boff might have. I don't really have a sense of why that might be. This is again through the first quarter, possibly just some accounts that either have fallen off or potentially just some unique activity in the first quarter of last year, causing that to be a little bit higher. Miscellaneous revenues, these are primarily fees that you're paid to process biosolids, 15,000 this year. Last year, that number for the full year did include some repayments from the tribe for legal fees. So that's why that number, the 361,000, is sort of stands out from last year. But total revenue for the sewer fund, 304,000. Dropping down, you'll see expenses of 190,000. So net revenue of 114,000 year to date for the sewer fund compares to last year net revenue of 105,000, and so positive performance on the sewer operating fund on a net revenue basis. And then just below that, show you the system development charges. These are fees that are paid on development permits, both commercial and residential. 179,400, and this is directly related to the chart that I showed you earlier. That compares to 31,200 from last year, so a significant increase in the system development charges that were paid. And then lastly, the stormwater fund. This is a new fund that you implemented last year for your stormwater utility. Revenue in the first quarter of 47,000, 21% of the full year budget. Operating expenses of 18,000, net revenue of 28. And you can see last year, nothing in the first quarter. It wasn't operating until later in the year. And you can see the full year data for 2019 there as well. So that's the first quarter report for the operating funds. And again, I think positive performance on the general fund revenues, sort of uncertain performance on the general fund expenses, unclear whether any of those trends will result in any challenges later in the year. But overall, better performance than last year in the general fund, and then also better performance on a net revenue basis for the sewer fund and the stormwater fund. Moving on to just some other highlights to key in on. The real estate excise taxes. These are revenues that are based on the sale, paid by the seller when they sell real estate. And you can see these are up more than double from last year. Your tax rate is 0.5% on the sale. So this year's activity reflects roughly 16 million in sales compared to last year's roughly 6.5 million in transactions. You did purchase one of two budgeted police patrol vehicles in the first quarter, although my understanding is that the upfitting has been impacted by the COVID-19 supply chain disruption. So while the vehicle has been purchased, it's not prepared and ready to be put into operation yet. Single family home valuation. So back looking at the permit activity, the valuations are very strong through the first quarter of the year at 13 million, compares to 19 million for all of last year. And first quarter full valuation for all permits at 24.6 million. That's versus 20.3 million from last year. This is a good sign for future property tax base. So last year, your new construction valuation was about $26 million, and that correlates fairly closely to that 24 million in new construction valuation. Just to provide a little bit of reference for this, for every $10 million of new construction, you get about $84,000 in sales tax, and you'll create roughly $8,000 of new property tax revenue. So the development activity is a sort of a good indicator on both the sales tax and your future property tax. As our annexations, you approved a number of, I guess, one 5-acre annexation. There are several other annexations in process. These will also be added to your property tax levy for next year when they come into the city. And again, they should provide another, well, I'd say $5,000 to $10,000 of property taxes, depending on the development that's on those properties. And then, as I mentioned, the La Center Middle School building permit was issued. They had their groundbreaking on May 7th. And again, this is a positive thing, both from a development permit fee standpoint, but also from a sales tax standpoint. And then lastly, we usually try and give you a reserve balance slide compared to the policies. I think you're aware that you've got an external CPA firm reviewing your financial statements and your general ledger, getting ready for your 3-year audit coming up later this summer. We don't have final reserve balances for each of the different funds that you have. We do have a total of 14.6. And I did check in, still over $5 million of reserves in your general fund and your reserve fund. And the balance in the sewer operating and debt service and capital funds, as well as the city's restricted capital funds. But the 5.1 million is roughly the amount in your general fund and your reserve fund. And we'll provide a more detailed update for the reserve balances and the policy targets in your second quarter report.
Paul, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the previous slide? The real estate excise tax, you said is 0.5%. What sets that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Who sets that?
What sets that 0.5% on a real estate excise tax? Do we set it, or is that a state number? Or?
It's in your municipal code. So you adopted, there's 2 0.25% real estate excise tax revenue sources, and these have to be used for capital that is associated with new development. So this helps pay your public share for different things for streets, parks, public facilities, and those types of things. So it's a restricted revenue source that cities collect based on the sale of real estate in their jurisdictions. The full amount, I think, is still at, well, actually it's gone up. I know they changed it. The state's, the lion's share of that real estate excise tax, I don't have the exact number, but it used to be 1.28% was the state's share. So a fairly close to 2% excise tax paid on the sale of real property.
Is the 0.5% that we charge, is that in line with other cities?
Yep, it's what's allowed in state law, and virtually all cities that are in counties that plan under the Growth Management Act have implemented both 0.25%, so both the full 0.5%.
Okay, but that was the original question. So the cap is set by the state?
Yes.
Sorry,
okay,
let me.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
It's not really a cap. It's you either opt to take the 0.25 and the 0.25 or you don't.
Okay, thank you, Micah.
Okay. So the next series of slides go into the revised general fund forecast on both the revenue and the expense side. Just want to hit some highlights, and again, I'll mention my qualifiers a number of times as we go through this, but it's really, I like to say the first quarter really isn't the robust level of data that you want to use to project a full year. And in addition, with the COVID-19 and the restrictions that are being placed now on business activity, it's even more of a challenge to try and create an estimate for the full year. But I do want to provide at least an informed estimate and show you some of the assumptions that we use to come up with that estimate. So, first off, on the gambling taxes, the assumption is that the card rooms would be closed for 3 months. So they closed in the middle of March, which means they would be closed through the middle of June. I think that was a little bit more certain last week than it is this week. But that's the assumption that we used in the forecast. Activity starts at 50% of 2019, growing to 85% of 2019 at the end of this year. So if you look at between now and the end of the year, the average is roughly 2/3 of last year's activity through the last six and a half months of the year. And you'll see that number later. Property taxes, as I mentioned before, this is a fairly sound source. Doesn't vary much, primarily due to the foreclosure threat. We do see delinquencies rise in years where we have recessions or high unemployment. We expect those to potentially peak at the 7 to 10% range. We'll know more after the June 3rd payment for first half taxes. But ultimately, most of this money ends up coming in later years. You'll see, I think I've got a roughly a 6% drop compared to the budget factored in the forecast. Utility taxes, as I mentioned before in response to Councilmember Boff, I'm expecting the same as 2019. Just taking my cue off of the first quarter amounts, which are virtually the same as last year. Again, this may be conservative, both from the standpoint of different unique activities in the first quarter this year, but also if we have development activity continuing to be at the levels that it has been through the first 5 months, and home sales can occur, this may in fact beat the forecast and beat last year's estimate. And development permits, similarly trying to provide a little bit of a conservative estimate, overall reduction of about 20, 25, 30% compared to the budget, and looking at just a general decrease of activity, wanting to be conservative. A little bit more information on how we develop the sales tax forecast. Your taxable retail sales by industry sector is fairly well concentrated in 2 industry sectors. The table in the upper left-hand part of this slide shows the top 5 industry sectors and their share of your total taxable retail sales. And you can see retail, trade, and construction, more than 2/3 of that total of your taxable retail sales. The other 3 on this chart total just about 18%, a little over 18%. So 85% of your taxable retail sales are represented by these 5 industry sectors. There's another 8 or 10 or so industry sectors that make up the other 15%. And to develop the forecast, I went back and said, okay, what percent reduction in taxable sales in these major industry sectors would we expect in each of the subsequent quarters for this year? So just to look at retail trade, thinking 85% reduction in the second quarter, 50% reduction in the third, and a 10% reduction in the fourth quarter. For construction, again, 75, 25, 10. And you can see for the others, 33, 25, 10, and 80, 25, 10. So all rolled up, taking this for all of the different industry sectors, the reduction in the second quarter would be 72%, 35% in the third quarter, and a little over 10% in the fourth quarter. And again, reflect that there's a 2-month lag between the sales activity and the revenue for the city. So that's how it informed that's what informed the sales tax, the base sales tax estimate. And the chart on the bottom right is one that I think I've shown you before, but this just shows the percentage of your sales tax base that is consists of construction. So it comes from that construction industry sector. And you can see the peak in that green area in 2016 and 2017. That was from the construction of the interchange and the sewer line to the junction. And you can see falling back to somewhat more normal levels in 2018 and 2019. What I like in this chart is the sort of the steady growth in that blue line there. That's your base non-construction, and that is really a function of a growing retail sector base, more stable retail activity taking place in your city limits. Here's another chart for the sales tax forecast. This is the same chart that I showed you before in the historical activity, but it includes the month-by-month forecast of revenue and compares it to the, again, the 17, 18, and 19 lines. And in this, I added the La Center Middle School construction beginning in May, which really means the revenue impact won't really be felt until July, but added that on through the last half of the year for your sales tax revenue. And you can see it makes a fairly significant difference, seeing some, especially applying that 72% reduction overall in the coming months in terms of the sales tax base. But overall, expecting you to end the year at 374,000, again, beating 18 and 19, but falling short of 2017 when you had that major construction activity. So that's the monthly sales tax forecast. And this is about 10%, a little over 10% of your revenues. On the expense side, a couple of quick estimates here, just to show you some of the assumptions around the estimates. The police department, there is a vacant patrol officer position beginning this month, but there will be overtime to provide the full fixed post staffing that you provide. Finance, there's also a vacancy in the finance manager that will be filled later this year, is planned to be filled. You also are incurring professional services to backfill that. We don't expect any savings there. Community development, there's also a vacant position that's shared with Public Works, but as you're aware, higher professional services costs will offset, is expected to offset any savings. Public Works, again, a seasonal position not filled, has that shared position with community development. And some discretionary projects will also be deferred or delayed as well, reducing some of the expenses. So you roll all that together on the revenue and the expense estimates. I've got the two charts here. The left-hand side shows the revenues by major source. The first column's the original budget. Second column is the preliminary estimate, and then the dollar change and the percent change. On the top portion of the taxes, you can see a little bit of impact from the delinquencies on the property taxes, 5.9% reduction. The utility excise taxes, if they come in the same as last year, would be down around 67,000 or 20%. This may not be so much impacted from COVID-19, just potentially a guess on the development activity and the impacts on the utility excise taxes. Sales tax expected to be down a full 100,000 or 21%. And that percentage is roughly in keeping with what I've seen from other jurisdictions that are providing these kinds of estimates as well. The sales tax hit, I'll be interested to see what the actual is coming forward. Keeping with that same reduction in the local criminal justice sales tax, this is a countywide base. And then big impact on the gambling tax, 500,000. If you take those assumptions that I mentioned earlier about the slow ramp up in their activity, would result in about $800,000 of revenue this year, 500,000 less than the 2020 budget, which was effectively the same revenue that you had in 2019. So overall, on the tax side, reduction of 713,000. And if you factor in primarily the reduction in the development activity, roughly 20 to 30% reduction in development activity, you can see licenses and permits expected to come in at 394, 126,000 or 24% less than the original budget. Similarly, charges for goods and services, 63,000 or 29% less. Fines and forfeitures, primarily taking my cue off of the first quarter of this year and just annualizing that, comes in less as well. And then miscellaneous, just taking a little bit of an estimate, reduced estimate there. All told, on the revenue side would be a reduction of $930,000, 25.3% of the revenue, excluding the transfers. Adding in the transfers, it's about a 23% reduction in the revenue side. Turning to the expenses, again, not a significant amount of savings anticipated in finance or in the legislative area. Police, potentially optimistic in terms of projecting $84,000 in savings there, again, related to the vacant position, but also potentially some other expense reductions. One caveat here is the potential for retro pay. So we need to look into see if you're able to provide a settlement on the labor negotiations. We need to research the impact of any retroactive pay for 2019 in those numbers. Planning expected to come in at or slightly above the original budget. Public Works, again, hoping to come in under budget based on the vacant position and the not filling the seasonal positions. If you total those up, you get a little over $187,000 of savings, roughly 4.7% reduction compared to the budget. Combining the two revenues and expenses, the deficit is expected to grow from a $29,822 surplus to a deficit of $742,822. Obviously, a more precise estimate there than what will be realized. And again, my note here and additional caveats, a significant amount of uncertainty exists on both the revenue and the expense side. And I would just add another comment. If you look at that 743,000, roughly 500,000 of it relates to the card room. So well over 2/3 is related to the card room revenue estimate. An additional 100,000 is related to the retail sales tax impact. So that's the roll up on the operating side. I do have a slide on the capital, but I'll pause here to see if there are any questions. Hearing none, I will move on to the quick update on the capital budget. And this is really more of a status update on the projects that were approved in the 2020 budget. The first set of projects are funded out of the Capital Projects Fund. And again, this is a fund that has a fairly over $6 million. And this relates to impact fees that you've collected over time, park traffic impact fees, the real estate excise tax that we mentioned earlier as well is included in here. So these are dedicated funds that can only be used for capital projects. Stone Creek reconstruction is the major reconstruction projects. That's out to bid now and is expected to be completed this year. The new City Hall project, so planning continues on that project, $300,000 budget. I think in the first quarter, there was under $25,000 of expenses towards that project so far. Tennis court resurfacing, so there's a couple small projects in here that are recommended to be completed. The Holly Park drainage is actually one that's on hold, a little bit larger project that has some grant funding. The question here is whether the city is in a position to provide the $75,000 match. I think the intention was originally to have that be provided in kind, but with the lack of seasonal labor, there's some question as to whether or not you're in a position to be able to provide that. The Holly Park repaving is on hold, but there was a suggestion to potentially include that as a bid alternate on the Stone Creek reconstruction. I think the mayor's comment was with oil prices down, maybe asphalt prices will be down as well. Might be a good opportunity to try and get both of those projects done this year. And again, the paver, parking lights, playground equipment, small projects to move forward. The junction sign really hasn't had a whole lot of progress and has been on the list for a couple of years, putting that on hold at least for a good portion of the year. And then the 4th Street widening and Breezy Creek culvert is a design and engineering, and that work is underway currently. Finally, the community development, the planned action area, this would be $250,000, and this would also be proposed to be completed in 2020. Quickly on the equipment replacement fund, as we mentioned, one of 2 of the police cruisers has been purchased, although the upfit has not been completed. And a pickup truck was purchased for Public Works, came in under budget. And that was split between the parks and streets, which are funded out of the general fund, and then the sewer and stormwater fund picked up a quarter of that cost each. Sewer funds, you can see the projects listed there. And then finally, stormwater, just the pickup purchase. So that concludes my presentation on the update to the 2020 operating and capital budgets. Again, I'll pause here. I've got one more slide on the 2021 budget process before I'm completely done. Any questions on the capital budget information?
I just have a comment. This is Greg. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation. Extremely well done as always. So for the council, just review this capital project budget for 2020 and just get your thoughts on the suggestions here as far as moving forward those projects this year.
Well, I can tell you that, yeah, I can tell you just from the work that I'm seeing done around the county and other government entities, everybody's put a freeze on unnecessary spending. I'm not saying to stop us in our tracks, but if you take 2018 and when we were doing projections for 2019, we were only supposed to be off about $3.25 or so, $327,000 or something like that in a deficit. And surprise, at the end of 2019, it came to $500 and some odd thousand. And that was without any stoppage or any revenue interruption. Now we have COVID going on and we have a few months of interruption on income here, and it's going to take a little while to jumpstart things. Like I said, I'm not saying stop everything, but I mean, some of these things could probably be put on hold until the end of the year, or maybe go into the 2021 budget, just to ensure that we're going in the right direction. There's quite a bit here that I see as more frivolous spending at that point. You know, some nice stuff that would be great to have, but I think the public would be more forgiving in the way that we're spending funds if we do it more responsibly during these times. That's my opinion on it.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you have any specific suggestions, Tom?
No, I really need to sit down here and look over Paul's report here because, you know, being the first quarter, we still really don't know how this is going to affect us. And we don't know how strong those card rooms are going to come back, and they are the majority of our revenue stream, or a very, very big part of it. And we really need to see how they're going to come back and give them a month or two and say, okay, hey, we're back on this track, and now we can keep going with our plans. But, you know, I think maybe as a group we sit down and kind of go through some of these budgets here, the capital budget plan, and go, hey, can we put this on hold? Can we keep going with this? Is this something that can be put to 2021? I don't think any one person just throwing out a bunch of ideas is great. I think it should be done as a group, honestly.
Okay, well, I just Only comment on that is the Stone Creek reconstruction that is out to bid. That's a project that was a high priority for the city. As you know, Stone Creek is in need of repair. I don't know that we really want to delay that this year. City Hall is something that I think the city definitely needs to move forward on. Again, we've had lots of discussions about the City Hall, purchased the TDS building 2 years ago now. It's the architectural design and work is pretty much completed. It'll be coming to the city for review. I think to consolidate our city operations into that building would be a huge improvement. Even especially now in light of what's happening as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic, we need to get everybody consolidated into one building to continue to increase our efficiencies and effectiveness in operations. We have made some adjustments to the Holly Park drainage. Again, the issue there is really the in-kind allotment from the city to offset the expenditure. There are a couple of minor expenditures here, the Holly Park sunshade and the parking light, Holly Park parking lights or paved parking lot lights. I think that's something we can move forward on, and definitely the playground equipment. Those are some repairs that need to be made to the playground equipment that really address some safety issues. We delayed the junction sign for a savings of $150,000. And of course, the 4th Street widening and Breezy Creek culvert, that is a 100% grant by Department of Commerce. So there's really no match there by the city. That's money that's been strictly grant money. And as far as the planned action area, I think it's critical that the city continues to move forward with our planning process and trying to work with redevelopment for the downtown core area and Timmon Landing. I don't know that we really want to diminish that. So with that being said, I don't know if any of the other council members have any thoughts on that, but again, this is not general fund revenue. These are monies that are in our capital projects fund. Paul, do you know what the balance of that fund is off the top of your head?
All I know is that the sum total is in excess of 6 million. It has different buckets. So you've got traffic impact fees, park impact fees, real estate excise taxes, as I mentioned before. The impact fees have certain 10-year spending requirements. So you have to spend those within a certain time period of when you've collected. I do know that the CPA firm is putting together information on sort of where you are with respect to the restrictions on those funds. But 6 million is the number that I have for the total capital.
Okay.
Greg, this is John. I could see us pausing on the Holly Park drainage project, and I could see us pausing on the repaving project. The drainage, I think, needs to go back to engineering. When I finally got to see the plan Tony had, I don't think it's even in the right area. Two other reasons, maybe just one. There are no longer any programs playing soccer in La Center, which is kind of sad. Maybe we need to do some work on the fields for that. But I think that one needs to go back to engineering and at least have a look at it. The paving, we've kind of talked about this one a couple times. If we get some bang for the buck and, you know, MOB and DMOB, if it goes out as a bundle with the 4th Street project, you know, maybe it would be worth it to do it. But I don't really see that needing to be done right away. That's just my vote.
Okay.
Yeah, Doug here. I don't think we want to lose any grant money or matching funds because we held up an expenditure. So I think that's important. And I don't think that we should be deferring any activities that would end up costing us more because we waited. But if a capital expenditure or anything on this list does not fall into those categories, where we can truly defer the expense without an additional future cost or loss of matching funds, then I think we should just push it back to next year.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, I don't know that we have any real conclusions here. I guess it's something that we can revisit after everybody has a chance to spend some more time. I just want to make one more comment that for the sewer capital fund, the collection systems improvement, that's actually, that $400,000 is for a pump station that's going to be part of the middle school construction. That's really changed a little bit. That interlocal agreement is structured as I understand it. And if Matt, if you're on this evening, if you could chime in, but I understand that the school will actually be responsible for paying 100% of that this year. And then the city will be making payments over 5 years for reimbursement. So I don't know that the expenditure for that collection system will be that much. That one needs to be looked at again as well. And again, to your point, Doug, I recognize what you're saying about is grant money or leaving money on the table. And more specifically about the Holly Park drainage. Is that what you were referring to, Doug?
Well, I wasn't specifically thinking of Holly Park. I was just talking in a general sense. But yes, I mean, if the situation will not get worse because we wait, then we probably should. But if it's going to cost us more at the end,
point,
no, we shouldn't.
Sorry.
So
That one we've deferred.
To Doug's point, I'd like to just point out, I mean, holding off, we're actually a month away from the end of Q2. So, and this is where a lot of this reporting is going to come in, to where you're going to see a lot of the effect. I don't see anything on this capital budgets that's saying that we have to get it completed or get it going out in the next month or so. So if we put it off for a few months to see where we're at, I think that's a better way to go. I mean, I get the out to bid, that stuff's already going, but any of this other stuff can be kind of placed on hold for another 30 to 45 days or 60 days. I just don't see a harm in that. Just to give us a better understanding of what we're looking at coming back out of this pandemic that we're in.
So if I'm hearing you right, Tom, you're saying that go forward with the Stone Creek reconstruction because that is out to bid?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to go with it. You've already got the bid going on there, and I understand like the sewer funds there, the pump and stuff for the middle school, because that's in the middle of or started construction already. So some of the stuff that we're already in the middle of kind of has to continue, but any of the other type of stuff there can really kind of hold off for a couple months here until we get until Paul can give us another report of what second quarter is looking like. And Paul, is there a way to be able to get a report on second quarter a lot sooner than 2 months later? I mean, so maybe something like in the second or third week of July, because that only puts you out 60 days from here.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, the intention is to provide that in July. I was sort of brought in a little late on this and wanted to give you I think the intention was to try and come up with a forecast, and so the first quarter was really the foundation for that. But yes, the second quarter report will be available in July.
Okay. I'm not sure how everybody else feels. I just don't know what we're looking at until that time period comes. And you guys already know I'm one of caution. So
this is Matt Jenkins. Am I coming through all right?
Yes, Matt.
Okay. So going back to the timing of things, we can put some things on hold, no doubt about it. I agree with Tom, Councilmember Stroman, sorry. But when it comes to the Holly Park Sunshade and the tennis court resurfacing, there's a construction season window there. And so if we are going to push those, we might as well just push them till next year. I don't see long-term damage being done if we do push them, but they're, again, it's we have to weigh value versus risk on that. The only other one that I would speak to, and that was the only other question I would say I'd speak to, is the mayor's question about the $400,000 repayment for the sewer operating fund. The way we structured that agreement with the school district is it's actually going to be 34% the school district, 66% the city. That'll obviously have to come through council, but that'll be paid for over 5 years. So it'll be more around $100,000 a year for the next 5 years, not $400,000 this year. I hope that clarifies some things.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Okay, so with that being said, I guess what I'm looking for here is some clarity on what to move forward on. And we're running up against the clock at 6:35 now. We have to start the council meeting. But the Stone Creek reconstruction, we're going to go forward with. The new city hall, again, those architects, we're going to be just about done with the plans. Will be returned to the city for plan review. We can start that project. Some of these smaller projects, we can, definitely defer them. Of course, the engineering and design on the 4th Street widening, that's again grant money. That project will move forward. And then the only other, the planned action area, and we can definitely reduce that scope down this year to maybe not include the whole planned action area budget, but we can at least start some of that work internally and get some things done there. So with that being said, I don't know if anybody has any opposition to the projects, but if you do, let me know. But again, some of these are out to bid and some of these are well underway. So I don't think we should.
Well, Mayor, should we have a meeting on this maybe next week or something, a quick virtual meeting for all of us and kind of go through it one by one and kind of figure out if it's something that we need to move forward or is that out of the question?
Yeah, so I don't know that council members, are you prepared after going through that? These aren't that many numbers here. Again, the bid opening for Stone Creek is June 1st.
I don't see.
I'm fine.
I don't think we can delay Stone Creek. That's a safety hazard. When it's below freezing, that road freezes. It's across the street from the school and it's downhill. It's a steep grade. I don't want to see that one delayed. I'm fine with the others you mentioned. The little ones, I think we can kick out a year. That's junction signs already on hold. So I don't know. Seems pretty nailed down to me.
Okay. Very good. All right.
Yeah, great. Doug here. Just one last comment on the planned action area. I don't want to see that stop. I mean, if we can at least start the project, and as you suggested, then maybe spread out the outlay. Okay. That would be great. But I think we do need to start that project because we have competitors. We have a city called Ridgefield, and we've got Woodland, and they are out there trying to get developers to come in. And I think we need to be moving things along so that we can grow and meet the challenges that they present.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up the work session. Again, we're running over for the city council meeting, but Paul, if you could please present your last slide.
Sure. So just quickly, the budget process for 2021, as I mentioned, we'll have the second quarter financial update in July. We're also going to be presenting that month some budget revenue and expense options to the Budget Advisory Committee. And then the baseline budget would be coming following that in the summer or early fall with options to address any expected surplus or deficit. And then the preliminary budget comes in October, and then the council meets to review and adopt the budget in November and early December if needed. So typical budget process with the exception of some earlier activity related to coming up with some options in anticipation of a potential deficit.
Okay, very good. Any final questions for Mr. Lewis this evening? Okay.
Good presentation.
Yes, thank you again, Paul. So right now at 6:37, I think what we'll do is just take a pause here till 6:45. If everybody could just shut down their microphones and their cameras, And at 6:45, we'll just leave out everything running, and we'll just take a quick break to give everybody a minute, and then at 6:45, we'll start the city council meeting.
Okay,
Is everybody okay with that?
sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Paul.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, we are recording.
Very good. Well, thank you. So Micah was good enough to get a American flag posted here for us. So to start off the meeting, I'd like for everybody to please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could I have the roll call?
Councilmember Boff,
Here.
Councilmember Stimmel,
Here.
Councilmember Williams,
Present.
Councilmember Strobin,
Here.
Councilmember Cerveny,
Here.
and Mayor Thornton.
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there are no requests for any items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda are citizens' public comment. Clerk, do we have any comments for this evening?
1 second, Mayor. I have to use a different computer for that. I do not see any, Mayor.
Very good. Okay. Next on the agenda is the mayor's report. I have just a couple of things that I'd like to share with the council this evening. First of all, I just want to thank the city staff for their commitment to keep the city functioning during this COVID-19 pandemic. City services continue to be provided to the community with limited restrictions. So I think the city staff is doing just an absolute great job, all things considered, dealing with the issues because of the COVID-19 pandemic. As you all know, the city offices are closed, but the city is functioning for the most part pretty much as usual. We do have a couple of our staff members working from home. Some are working from home on a part-time basis. Some are coming into the office on a part-time basis. Some of the staff members do come in on every day, and then some of the public works crew, they alternate shifts, so they're not all arriving at the same time. But at the end of the day, the city really is functioning well, and I really am grateful to the city staff for their continued hard work and commitment to the city. And I think you probably all know that Clark County still is in phase 1 of Governor Inslee's phase program that he has outlined, and we're in the stay home and stay healthy phase. So I do anticipate that the city offices will continue to stay closed at least for another few weeks. I do know that there's guidance coming out from the state on a pretty regular basis now for some of the requirements that are going to be necessary when we do reopen and how we're going to interact with the public. And one of those, for instance, we'll need to, of course, be wearing face masks, and I believe we'll have to be putting up some plexiglass shields and what have you when we do, again, start meeting the public and greeting the public, but there'll be more to come on that. I also just want the council to be aware that the city has posted the job flyer for the replacement for the finance manager. We're going to take a different direction, and be advertising for a manager of administrative services. So that's been posted on the city website as well as several other websites that Janice Corbin is using to advertise that. Paul Lewis mentioned earlier this evening in our work session that in Dustin's absence, since he has resigned from the city, we do have Teresa Johnson's firm. She's a CPA, and her firm is working with the city right now in assisting the finance department in preparing our financial report for the reports for the state auditor's office, along with several other projects that they're working on. And there'll be more to come on that as well. The other comment I have this evening is, again, because of the restrictions that we're all dealing with right now, there will not be a mayor's town hall in June. We really have for the council this evening. The next on the agenda is the attorney's report. Bronson, do you have anything for the council this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. I do. I've been serving as your city attorney now for a little over 3 months. I'd like you to know how much I'm enjoying doing that, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve as your city attorney. I've been spending generally about 6 to 10 hours a week working on various matters. In the past month, I would say most of my time has been spent working on various development projects, and recently probably the Riverside Estates project more than others. I'd like to take just a bit of time and quickly review with you where things stand with the COVID-19 outbreak and getting government back to normal in its terms of its operations. A few of the developments, just going back in time a bit, are that the governor declared a state of emergency. It was February 29th. There have been a large number of different proclamations on different issues, but the most significant one affecting us is March 23rd, Stay Home, Stay Healthy proclamation, which required citizens to stay home except for engaging in essential activities or engaging in employment in essential services. The Stay Home, Stay Healthy proclamation was followed the next day with a proclamation addressing the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act. And the Open Public Meeting Act aspect of his proclamation, as you know, was issued March 24th, and that prohibited in-person public meetings and limited actions that government could take to matters that are, the term is necessary and routine, or were necessary to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. That proclamation on open public meetings has been extended at least a couple times by the legislative leaders of the House and Senate. But right now, that proclamation is due to expire this Sunday, May 31st. So whether or not it will be extended again or not, I can't tell you. If it is, we'll be operating under the same limitations. The proclamation doesn't define what is necessary or routine. I think routine is pretty easy to define. It's what we normally do. But what is necessary is more subject to interpretation. And like I said, the proclamation didn't attempt to define what's necessary or routine. There hasn't been any guidance issued on it. The Attorney General's office has put out an informal guidance, and they relied on dictionary definitions of necessary to be things that are required to be done, what's needed, what's essential, and suggests that you act if it's an act that can be put off until later. It doesn't have to be done now. Are there financial or legal consequences for not taking the action now? But hopefully, what we'll see is that the proclamation is not extended, and there will be guidance issued as to how we are to resume open public meetings with the public present, whether that involves limitations on attendance, spacing within the meeting, remains to be seen. The other aspect affecting government operations is the governor's Safe Start Washington plan. That's the plan that includes 4 phases of reopening the state. It is done county by county. Clark County is currently in phase 1. Submitted a plan, as you probably know, for moving to phase 2. But with the outbreak at the Firestone plant, that is up in the air a little bit right now. But in phase 2, the reopening includes professional services and office-based businesses. So for us, I think that means that we could return to having people come to work in professional capacities or office-based capacities such as finance or city clerk, but customer-facing government operations. So a classic example would be the permit counter. That is not reopened until we go into phase 3. So we should see in the next couple of days what the next development will be, government meetings and meeting in the public. That concludes my remarks.
Very good. Thank you for that, Johnson. Excellent. Any questions for the city attorney? Okay. All right, moving on then is council comments. Councilmember Boff.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As you know, C-Tran did not have a meeting in April. C-Tran did have a monthly meeting this month. It was held on the 12th of May. And this was a remote meeting, just as we are doing right now. Most of the meeting was devoted to the topic of COVID-19 and the effect that it is having on C-Tran. CEO Sean Donahue gave a very comprehensive update. And as you might imagine, C-Tran is being significantly impacted by the virus, as most of us are. So we'll provide just a brief summary of the key points that Mr. Donahue made in that meeting. Ridership for the week ending May 2nd, and keep in mind, please, that the C-Tran meeting was 2 weeks ago, that for the week ending May 2nd, overall ridership was down 55% when compared with the same week last year. The C-Tran drop of 55% was the smallest of any major agency in Washington state. The next agency had a 65% decrease in ridership for that same period. So while the overall ridership is down 55%, the commuter ridership is down 90%. The C-Tran paratransit service is down 81%, but local fixed route service is down 39%. But however, for the last 2 weeks, C-Tran is beginning to see an increase in ridership. In the financial area, major impact here. C-Tran will be forced to draw down their reserves. It's very obvious. The C-Tran budget is normally a biennial budget, but because of the impact, C-Tran will move to an annual budget for 2021, and they may continue annual budgeting through 2023, depending on the recovery of the economy. Sales tax revenue is projected to drop between 5 and 10%. I think that's less than what we are looking at. Sean seemed to feel, and the C-Tran people seem to feel, that the major sectors of business that contribute the most sales tax to Vancouver are ones that will continue to be fairly healthy. And that's why C-Tran is looking at the 5% drop on the sales tax revenue. All spending is being reviewed daily and weekly by all department heads. 8 capital projects have been put on hold. There are 9 capital projects that will continue. The Mill Plain BRT project will continue. There are others that are financed by grants or are well into the process that they will continue. In the human resources area, a hiring freeze has been put into place. There are 18 open positions right now for FTEs, and they will remain unfilled for the time being. And 75 employees have gone on a voluntary leave program. In the operations and maintenance area, primary focus is on employee safety and ridership safety. Strong emphasis on physical distancing and on sanitation. C-Tran is limiting the number of riders on vehicles at the same time, and they are shifting vehicles as necessary to accommodate any overflow situations. The operators are now assisting the vehicle service workers with the sanitation-related activities. And the 2 unions within C-Tran are working very well together to see that responsibilities now are being shared by more than one union. And Sean had a big thank you for the unions for their cooperation. C-Tran is continually monitoring CDC, state, and county health advisories. And because of safety considerations, vehicle maintenance is ongoing. Okay. So on an unrelated topic, I just want to say how wonderful it was to see over the Memorial Day weekend, to see the flags on the bridge again, as we have seen in the past. And I see that the flags now are extending all the way to the roundabout. It was quite impressive, and you can't help but feel proud to be a citizen of the center when you drive in and you see those flags out there. So I want to extend a big thanks to the American Legion for their efforts there. Okay, and that's all I've got tonight.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Stimmel.
Thank you, Mayor. No comments tonight.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. No comments tonight.
Councilmember Stolen.
I just want to reiterate what Doug or Mr. Boff just said about the flags. They look great coming in town. And that's it tonight. Thank you.
Very good. And Councilmember Cerveny.
I agree. The flags always add such a wonderful entrance into the town, and I think the community spirit, even over Memorial Day, is uplifted when those go up. So I sincerely thank the American Legion for doing that each holiday. It means a lot.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Council, thank you. Next on the agenda are staff reports. The first staff report this evening we'll have is a community development staff report, and Mr. Jeff Swanson will be presenting.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Micah, can you enable it so I can share my screen?
There you go, sir.
Thank you. Now let's see if I can.
It should just be down at the bottom, mic, camera, and then screen. If you click on the screen, it should show your desktop.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully this is working, and I'm gonna increase the size of this here, so hopefully it's, can you all see that?
Pretty small, Jeff.
Is it pretty small? Let me see if I can make it.
That's better if you could just center it now.
All right. How's that?
I can read it.
All right.
Okay.
So we'll go through just a few project updates to start. Heritage Center Building B. This is the commercial project in downtown La Center. They are going through final site plan review, and we've determined that a conditional use permit is required for a proposed tenant use there. And so we'll be working with the applicant through that process. An update on the middle school, building permits have been issued on the new middle school, and they're going to be placing a new portable at the existing middle school. We're working with the school district on that. Minute management, last evening, there was a conditional use hearing for the minute management project up at the La Center Junction. And we've talked about this project before. It's a new convenience store, fuel island, a hotel of approximately 100 rooms, 100-unit hotel, and a drive-through restaurant with a future phase that has single-level multi-tenant retail. And the applicant explained last evening that the way they would like to approach development on the site is to develop the back part of the site first, which is the drive-through restaurant and the hotel, and leave the existing convenience store and fueling operation in place until such time as the back part of the property is complete. And then they would shut down the convenience store, go through the demolition work, and close off the access break that they have on La Center Road. In terms of those coming to testify, Mr. Hornstein participated in the hearing on behalf of the Cowlitz tribe and testified in support of the project. The hearings examiner is leaving the record open for an additional week or so in case any other comments come in, and then he'll provide opportunities for staff and for the applicant to enter additional information into the record to respond to any comments that may come in, and then he'll issue his decision. The Shores B&B, this is another conditional use. It's a bed and breakfast with an associated residential use. At this time, the application has been deemed incomplete, and we're awaiting a resubmittal from the applicant. Highland Terrace, this is a project up Pacific Highway on the north side of the highway from where Riverside Estates is. And on this one, there was a post-decision review, and a variance decision for setbacks was issued on April 22nd. The applicant has requested an amendment to their development agreement to extend the expiration of the plat an additional year. The plat on this one is due to expire at the end of 2020, and the applicant has requested to extend that to the end of 2021. So that would require a type 4 approval process, which means it's before City Council. And we tentatively intend to bring that later in the summer, either late July or August, depending on continued discussions with the applicant. On the Holly subdivision, 7 single-family residential plans have been approved. Kay's Place, you'll begin to see some additional construction and civil improvements there for the second and third phases of that project. Another construction is going to be installing sewer lines, I believe. Riverside Estates now will do a little deeper dive into. They currently have 37 building plans approved in phase 1. The phase 2 engineering plans have been approved. The phase 3 final site plan is under review. Building plans have been submitted there. We are working with the applicant on, and I'll bring up my notes here. So in this additional narrative, the applicant is proposing changing the park areas in phases 1 and 2 and putting them into a proposed phase 4 park that would satisfy park requirements for all 3 of the phases, the phase 1 and 2, which are the single family residential, and phase 3, which is the multifamily. And I will see if I can pull up the plat here for you and show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Okay, I realize it's probably getting really small on your screens. Maybe we'll just make it that big. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So phase 1 and phase 2 are these single family phases. And so the current development agreement requires the applicant to develop this tract F as the park area satisfying the phase 1 park requirement. And over here, this tract A, a portion of tract A, to satisfy phase 2's park requirements. Phase 3, which is the multifamily, would then have to satisfy park requirements within their own development. And phase 4, which is this pretty highly encumbered property, it's encumbered with wetlands and buffer areas, would remain unimproved under the current development agreement. So what they're proposing is to eliminate this tract F and tract A park areas. They would be maintained as passive open space, which the homeowners association will be required to maintain the landscaping. And here's the plans for those 2 parks that would be eliminated, and instead develop in phase 4 this city park, which would satisfy the park requirements for phases 1, 2, and 3, all of the units being developed there. The city would make a payment to acquire the land at appraised value, and the developer would be credited the improvements that would be made to develop the park in terms of their park impact fees. The park impact fee credits would be issued to the developer. So the development agreement would need to be amended. And so the process for doing that would be to bring that before council at your June 24th meeting, subject to a 14-day notice. So that would need to go out on June 10th. But prior to that notice going out, we would need to do a SEPA determination of non-significance on the proposed changes. So any questions about Riverside Estates or about what may be coming before you in about a month?
Real
Jeff,
quick,
Doug,
Jeff. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Tom. Jeff, how large is the proposed park?
Well, the property itself for phase 4 is an area of a little over 5 acres. I'm not sure what the area calculation is for the portion that would be developed. It's roughly half of the property.
Okay.
The remainder of the property and the buffer areas would remain in that current state.
Can you bring the map up real quick, Jeff? Sorry, not to interrupt, Doug. I just wanted to be able to see the map as you're talking.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Is that
No,
okay?
that's just a rough idea. That helps. Thank you.
Yeah. So along
So-
with this, they would be doing frontage improvements along Pacific Highway as part of this park development, access, parking spots, paving, and so on.
Right. And this would be done after phase 4 or when?
This would be developed concurrent with phase 3. What the developer plans to do is when they have the contractor in to do the dirt work on the multifamily piece, they would use that same contractor to do the earthwork on the park development.
And is there a way to guarantee the money to build this set off to the side in case something happens to the developer during that time period? Because if something happens, then that doesn't get done.
Yeah, they'd be required to bond the project per city code at 125% of the value of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I got a procedural question here. Are we able to do or to vote on this? I thought we were not allowed to take any action of the governor's orders.
Well, we're not voting on anything this evening, Councilmember Williams.
No, at the June meeting.
Well, that,
At the June.
That's probably a good question, and maybe Bronson can chime in here. We've had a discussion internally about, the continued deferral of what would be considered non-essential business in a 30-day closure becomes more and more essential as time goes on. And Bronson, did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah. Remember that the restriction on the action that you can take is due to expire this Sunday, May 31st. So this is being scheduled for consideration June 24th, I believe. So
yeah,
we don't know if that restriction will be in place come June 24th. And even if it is, then the question is this something that's routine and necessary? And certainly consideration of development agreements is something that's routine, something that council normally does. And then that gets you to that more difficult question as well, is this necessary? And that is, again, it's a issue of interpretation, but something that you might defer and put off for a month maybe become more pressing when you get out 2, 3, 4 months. And so I think that it would be within the council's discretion and with legal advice to consider this matter to be necessary. You're getting to a point where if you don't get an agreement approved, you're going to miss an entire construction season. And that does have financial impacts both on the developer and the city. So I'm thinking that, hopefully we're not operating under the same severe restrictions on what actions we can take. But if we are, we can justify this as being a routine and necessary matter.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about Riverside? Okay, let me just scan back up to my notes here and make sure I didn't miss anything. So Tony wanted me to note in here that there are periodic federal rural transportation grant funds that are available through the Regional Transportation Council. The applications are due in July of 2020, so this coming July. And those programs are the STIP Rural Fund. There's 1.4 million that'll be available in 2023 and 400,000 projected to be available in 2024. Safe Routes to School and pedestrian grant fund programs. And so what Tony wanted me to ask this evening is council comfortable with the city applying for these funds for various projects around the city?
Yes.
Yeah, what would be the downfall of not doing it? I mean, we don't get the money.
You know, I'm never going to turn away free money.
Yeah, that's
No.
right.
Could that safe path to school? Could some of that go towards 4th Street?
Yeah, it's possible that some of that could go towards 4th Street and help to offset some of the construction costs to provide bike paths and sidewalks and whatnot.
Is there any major matching or anything like that that we have to do in order to qualify?
I think the rural match is pretty low, if I recall. I'll have to talk to Tony, more familiar with those programs. And the match can come from things like traffic impact fee collections. So it would be funds that we already have in fund balance to go towards projects that are in the 6-year tip.
I think we should move ahead with it.
Yeah, no reason not to.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, we will we'll proceed with haste.
Very
Any
good.
other questions on my report?
No, thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
So I just have one comment, Jeff, and it's really for last evening's public hearing. And my comment is what just on again what how the city staff performed in that meeting. It was extremely well done, both on the city side and on the applicant side. It's a complex project, and the total hearing lasted for about an hour and a half. Very professional. Our contract city planner, Ethan Spool, I thought did a wonderful job. Tony Cooper did great. Yeah, it was just, it went really well, and it's an exciting project for the city of La Center. And I think that the applicants, Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Tanner are really put together a wonderful project, and it's something that we should all be pretty excited about. So I just wanted to make that comment after your report this evening, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next on the agenda is the police staff report. Chief Denny will be presenting that this evening. And Chief, I neglected to talk about the seniors vehicle parade that is tentatively scheduled, I believe, for June 13th. If you could update the council or make any comments on that. I wanted to mention that in my open comments, but I forgot. And that parade that the senior class is going to have through town, and I understand they've reached out to you for some police cruiser, and I think they've reached out to the fire district as well. And it's going to be a parade where all the seniors need to stay in their vehicles, and they can only travel with their family members. But anyway, if you could just please include that in your report. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mayor and Council, the Police Advisory Report for April 2020. I'll go ahead and start with what the mayor just mentioned. We were approached by the school to assist in doing a parade for the graduation to show kids that were in support, and obviously because of COVID-19. So they anticipate having, she said 100 cars involved in the parade. We're only going to have 3 police vehicles involved, and then fire is going to also have fire apparatus involved in the parade as well. And we have a route scheduled to go through the school, starting at the La Center High School, going down to 4th Street from Highland, going through the parking lot of the middle school, and then onwards throughout the city and up Aspen and around. I believe we're going to go through Southview Heights and the Heritage Loop and back around to on 18th and out back up onto Aspen and back around till we get back to the school again, if that makes sense. I don't have a picture of the map in front of me right now, but that's kind of what we outlined. We've got some people calling in as well that were interested in making sure that we have enough parking available for people that want to come in from outlying areas and, you know, including the church and so forth, so they can see the parade and show their support. So I think it's going to be a well-attended event. It should be a lot of fun for everyone involved. And it should be pretty low key as far as, you know, the need for law enforcement, but we're there to light it up and show them our support. So it
Very
should
good.
be fun.
Thank you, Chief.
When is that
You're
scheduled?
welcome. The 13th of June.
Yeah, Saturday, 13th, I believe.
Saturday. I'm not sure of the time just yet. The sergeant's been doing the operation plan, and I haven't seen the finalization of that yet. I think it's during the day, isn't it, Mayor? Like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that?
I don't have the final time either, Chief. We'll have to check, and I'm sure it'll be on the high school website, but we can even post that on the city website when we find out the dates.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So onward. Unless you have anything else for the parade that's coming up. We have a rash of speeding complaints coming in. They're on the rise for claims of vehicles speeding into town from Lockwood, on Aspen and the Center Bridge. It's kind of our main areas that we concentrate on a lot. But throughout Aspen as of late, so we've been having some issues. Our traffic trailer currently, the radar trailer is out of service. We've been waiting on parts, but due to what's going on right now, it's been hard to get parts from the manufacturer. So as soon as we can get that back out there, we'll start doing some studying in the areas. And generally, though, we have been working in those areas. The officer that's on duty, we sit out in areas for any length of time and watch traffic. And generally speaking, the speeds that we are gathering, because they see our vehicle most of the time, are not that significant. I mean, we're talking the fastest speed maybe on it in the 25 is 37. But generally speaking, coming down the downgrades, we're talking 33 miles an hour. You know, and they're slowing when obviously they see us, but 33 miles an hour is kind of the average above the posted speed limit. I sat out on Aspen for 2.5 hours one morning looking at traffic, and that's pretty much what we've been finding throughout the city. So for the last, well, we talked about the radar trailer. Let's see. We've been also receiving numerous requests for parade escorts, but we are not engaging in those. Generally speaking, people want to have parades for their kid's birthday party or what have you, and we're referring those to the community development for permitting. But there's such a small event that generally people can do that on their own without any, you know, need for law enforcement. Otherwise, we'd be entertaining that all day long for retirements, birthday parties, and you name it. So we're trying to avoid getting involved in that if we can avoid it. We don't have the manpower to pull that one off. Currently, we're in the process of looking at a corrections deputy to become a reserve officer for the city of La Center. He has attended BELIA, which is the Basic Law Enforcement Training Academy. He does have a certification that's valid until I think June 25th. The reason why he's kind of in that status right now is he was a deputy on the road as FTO. They felt that he was a good employee, but he didn't pass their FTO process at the time and felt they needed to get some experience. So they put him in the jail because he was a valuable employee. And he's been recommended to us, since we're the only agency in the local area that has a reserve program where we have the capability of picking somebody up on reserve. If we do that, that will retain his certification status in proxy, but he still would need to attend a 2-week equivalency academy within 60 months to be able to go full-time status. So that's kind of the reason why it's a hope for him, and it's a potential positive for us to be able to pick up somebody that could work. And if we needed somebody on a temporary fill position, we may be able to get him on in that capacity in the future. So we'll see how he performs and work through the process.
Hey, Chief, what's field training? When it sits there, it stated that he did not pass his field training. Can you explain that a little bit? At least give me an understanding.
Sure. Each agency has their own field training officers and field training program. It is a state program that the officers attend the academy to be able to provide training to a officer that's in need. But it basically gives them the basics of how to do the job after they attend the academy, what the expectation of the agency is, how they're going to perform the job, how they react under stress, and all those types of things. And it's a 16-week program that we administer after they've already attended the basic law enforcement training academy. Generally speaking, because the sheriff's office is they don't have much grace or ability to prolong their FTO program as smaller agencies do and the call load allows. We have the opportunity to pick people up in that on a full training process and extend it if we need to, provide them additional mentoring and coaching to get them up to speed. And we've done that successfully for the last 3 candidates that we've picked up. We're in that kind of status that we picked up from Clark County Sheriff's Office.
All right.
Does that make sense?
I didn't. Yeah, it makes sense. I just didn't understand it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. In relation to our police Tahoe that we ordered the first of the year, that's still sitting in hiatus down in Salem, waiting to be upfitted by our builder. He's having a difficult time, just like the radar trailer, getting parts from the manufacturers to outfit the vehicles currently. So I don't have a estimated time when that will be delivered to us, fully outfitted for work, but I just wanted to give you an update of where the vehicle is at and what's going on with it. The next section, I cover some significant calls for multi-agency response. And the reason I'm doing that is because our stats generally don't show what really our calls are like and what it requires. So this little section here covers a small amount of calls and the amount of resources it actually takes on behalf of multiple agencies to respond to some of these incidences. And I'm not going to belittle, go into much detail about all these, but you can see on the first incident, I mean, it took nine officers to basically be involved in that incident, and 2 paramedics that came out to clear that scene. And that was a significant response that took quite a bit of manpower and also the time to do that. And not only at the scene, but coming back after the fact, conducting the investigation and the reports and all that. So you can imagine how much time it takes during an 11-hour shift or a 12-hour shift for a single event to take you as an officer. So I just wanted to point that out. You have an awareness of what actually goes on out there from some of the officers. And we generally only have 1, maybe 2 officers on at any given time. So we do rely on the outlying areas to cover us in calls, and that's or us responding to cover Ridgefield or the sheriff's office on calls, and that's why they're outlined in here as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for including that, Chief. That actually was very helpful in it.
Okay, and like I said,
that doesn't even mention the reports either. The reporting time that it takes after it.
Right. Well, and then the process along the way as it goes through the process of going through the prosecutor's office to the courts and all that. So there's very time consuming to get a case all the way through the process. So like I said, I'm not going to read through all these. I just wanted to include them so you're aware. And this happens on a regular basis. So this is nothing unusual. This was just pulling information from our stats that I generally provide to you and showing that some of these calls do require multiple agency responses to it because of the nature of the call and the seriousness of it that could cause physical risk to the officer and or the person that's involved and physical property to the property itself. Any questions in relation to that versus the stats that are coming up on the next page? As you can see, I mean, our calls have dropped off somewhat because of the COVID situation, but the officers are still maintaining the ability to be out there and be visible, and there's still calls coming in. And honestly, the calls of late that have been significant, we've been getting a great deal of frauds, ID frauds. So be careful and be aware that there's a Nigerian scam going on right now where they're pulling information from employers and claiming unemployment scams. And the employers have to report back to the unemployment agencies whether their person has been on unemployment or not. And so we're getting those, that's how we're getting reports of those currently, is that people are being advised from their employers that, hey, you're still working here, but you're filing for unemployment, and they're not. It's a scam that's going on, and a lot of the school districts are being targeted right now. We've had 2 incidences in our own city today that came in, so just be aware of that. And that's all I have, Mayor, just to kind of keep you updated where we're at, unless there's questions or concerns.
Hi, Chief. This is Doug. The audio at this end is you were cutting in and out a little bit when you were speaking, so I'm going to ask you a question. Hopefully, I'm not asking about something that was already discussed. When a call comes into Central Dispatch, how is it determined whether the call warrants backup or a single officer can respond?
Well, there's a lot of questions that are asked by the dispatcher. They do a phenomenal job of trying to determine what type of call is coming in, what the nature of the call is, whether there's weapons involved, what the scene is like, and try to determine what's going on there so we can kind of respond to a semi-known situation. Depending on the seriousness of the call, that will warrant how many officers are going to respond generally. You know, obviously a call where weapons are involved, and a majority of them are, there's multiple officer response requirements for that. There's also areas that we've already predetermined that require multiple officer responses to. They're in our CAD system as being a high danger area because of known people that are there that have threatened or have made threats to law enforcement and or have known to have been involved with assaulting an officer in the past. So we have those in the system as well. So that dictates how we respond to those calls.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Okay, thank you, Chief. Good report. Any other questions for the chief? Okay, so we have one more staff report this evening. I want to mention that Paul Lewis's presentation this evening served as this evening's finance report. So there will not be an additional finance report this evening. The one remaining staff report we have is from Public Works, and Matt Jenkins will be presenting. Matt? You're muted, Matt. Hi.
Never fails. Yeah, I'll be brief this evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council, citizens. Yeah, we have the May in the works report, and I'll be brief. I know there's been several staff reports this evening. On street facilities, you know, city staff continues to do the routine maintenance along with anything that shows up on their daily rounds, trying to make sure that potholes, any road hazards, anything like that is being taken care of, any eyesores. The community center, the play structures and restrooms throughout town still remain closed in line with Governor Inslee's order. Maintenance staff has been providing janitorial service for City Hall and community development offices, as our janitorial is currently on hold. On Pacific Highway, Lakeside Industries will be paving Pacific Highway from Larson Road south down to, I believe, 9th, if I'm not mistaken, towards Hannah's Farm subdivision. And the reason for that is to smooth out the patchwork left from Clark PUD, the water line trenching in Pacific Highway. The paving date when I drafted this was to be determined, but I believe that's going to occur in the next few days. Tony Cooper's working on that. On Parks and Grounds, mowing is back to a warm weather schedule. That frequency continues to increase as the weather warms and the foliage grows. Staff's currently putting trails in past preparation for high use in the nicer weather. Also, as we work through the phases and people are able to gather in larger groups, I expect there's going to be high use as we work through that. On the equipment side, staff's completed a number of annual services, fluid and filter changes on most of the city equipment. We're reaching the tail end of that. It's quite an extensive list, and you guys have been working really hard to get through that and keep on top of the routine stuff. On the personal side, currently all staff is working. We have modified shifts for high-risk employees. One specifically starts a little earlier than the rest so he can get situated. But other than that, all staff are healthy, present, and capable. There's no current projects on the list. On the wastewater operations side, the plant continues to operate well within its permit limits. Staff is optimizing the plant as we change from cold weather over warm weather. That changes the biology and a number of other parameters that the operators use to treat the water. So they just have to continually optimize it and adjust it as they go. But they're in that process right now. Our biosolids processing is still at normal levels. We're still processing for ALNA and the city of Kalama, though ALNA is currently on hold because with the shutdown, they just haven't had the need to dispose of waste sludge. So probably next 4 weeks we won't be receiving a load from ALNA, but after that we expect that to be back to normal. That hadn't occurred yet when I drafted this, so I apologize. On the maintenance side, routine preventive maintenance is ongoing and year round, but one non-routine item is the 6-ton gantry crane. As you come through town, you see it out away from the building where it's not normally located. That's undergoing maintenance on a travel motor. Both operators are working diligently on that to get that replaced and back up and operational. On the administrative side, the April DMR is complete and has been submitted. Staff's currently working regular shifts, but maintaining social distancing practices. Office and lab station frequencies remain increased due to COVID-19, though given the nature of their work, they run a pretty high frequency of cleaning and sanitizing anyways. The annual list of industrial users is being prepared for review and submission to the Department of Ecology. As we have businesses come on, we need to review those. We need to submit what the nature of their business is and how that's going to impact the system and send that review to Department of Ecology. The annual laboratory accreditation with Ecology is currently underway. We're in the process of that renewal, and the accreditation expires in June 7th, but we have all of our documentation in place, and that should be submitted next week. On the project side, there's no current major projects underway. And for the building department, permitting construction are moving forward in accordance with Governor Inslee's current order, or where we're at in that iteration of the order. staff is accepting plans and applications for review, but we are following the COVID-19 social distancing and modified intake procedures. Thankfully, we got a retired bank building, so that window has actually paid dividends during this whole shutdown, because we've been able to pass items through that safely, keep staff safe, and keep the developer safe as well. So that's been great. And then we have other precautions in place as far as how we intake plans that won't fit through that door, and then put them on a 72-hour hold to make sure that any possible contamination with COVID-19 has since expired. Inspections will be performed if the builder is meeting the criteria set by the center building official. So far, that hasn't been an issue. Everybody's very eager to get their projects moving and get them inspected. So they've been really cooperative with the building official in doing what it takes to move forward. And then staff are still working alternating office schedules in order to maintain social distancing. As Bronson had said earlier in his report, once we reach a phase that says we no longer have to do that, we'll go back to full occupancy. But are there any questions? Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Good report. Your mic was not the best mic. I don't know if it's your computer or if you've got something else, but we'll have to take a look at that, Matt.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I apologize.
Mayor, that can be his bandwidth as well.
Well, okay. All right.
Sorry, Mayor. It looked like Randy was trying to say something. If he was muted.
Okay. Still mute. Randy, you're muted. Oh, you're good? Okay. All righty. Well, that concludes this evening's city council meeting. That's all we have on the agenda. Thank you, everyone. Reminder to stay healthy and stay safe. And with that, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Again, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
too.
Have a
Thanks,
good
guys.
night.
Good night, everyone.